Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Writer's Edge. I'm your host, Chrissy Stratus, and tonight we're going to talk about writing amazing romance subgenres, and we have an incredible panel here tonight. I just want to tell you guys that some people here are prolific, some are on their second book, third, fourth, it doesn't matter. These women are amazing. I've checked out their books, and they really know what they're talking about. So I'm really excited about that, and as you know, we do have typical questions that we already got started on, and as you know, or you may have seen, we actually have a blog post up right now on thewritersedgeshow.com/blog, and right there you can actually find some of the questions that I'm going to be asking as answered by Tim Reynolds. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the opposite sex on this panel. It was very hard to find, but I was able to find a romance writer who is male and was able to answer the questions on the site. So definitely check him out there. Please leave your questions in the chat. I will be checking and bringing them up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you can always see when we go live with a new video. So I'm going to first let everyone introduce themselves, and then I'm going to introduce myself. So here we go. Let me ask you to start, Miranda.
Hey everybody, my name is Miranda O. I am the author of the Chin Up, Tits Out series. I'm from Lowell, Manitoba, Canada, and it's super duper cold. So I'm really happy that we get to talk about all the hot and juiciness of romance tonight.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. And Chris, what about you?
Hi everybody, I'm Chris Michaels, and I write hopefully the hot and sexy romance that Miranda was talking about. USA Today bestseller, yes, thank you, Lord. And I've got 14 books out, working on the 15th. I love writing romance and all things associated with the romance world.
That's incredible. I'm thrilled to have you here. And how about Elle?
Hi, from Florida. So I actually have a bit of warmer weather, not the cold. I'm Elle Viviani. I've written 4 books on my 5th. I've been writing since June of last year, and I write steamy contemporary romance.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, bring some of that heat over here.
Yeah.
And how about you, Victorine?
Hi, I'm Victorine Liskey. I live in Nebraska, which is cold right here. And I write sweet romance. And my first book hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was fantastic. And I'm working on my 13th novel now.
That's wonderful. Thank you for being here. And now we have Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Halliday, coming at you from Las Vegas. I am a USA Today bestselling author. I'm also the mother of another USA Today bestselling author, Miss Ella Fox. I have 24 books out, about to do 25, and I think I am the keeper of the happily ever after guarantee. And yes, hot and steamy also.
Good to mix those two things.
Yeah.
And finally, Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia Harden. I am coming to you from Texas. It's a little warm today, but it's going to be cold tomorrow. And I'm just getting over a cold. So if I start coughing, I may have to go off air for a minute. I have about 24 books under my belt. I'm a USA Today bestselling author. I write paranormal romance, contemporary romance, a little bit of urban fantasy. And I also have another pen name that I write some erotic romance.
Great. I'm so happy to have all of you here tonight. As you guys can tell already, this is an amazing panel. So I'm Chrissy Stratus. You guys know me. I'm the author of the Dark Victoriana collection, which includes the books Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Lock and Key, much more to come. I'm also on Wattpad with a couple of free short stories, of course, on the dark side, and both are under 1,000 words. I have more to come on that shortly. So we're going to jump right into our set questions. And like I said, please do feel free to leave questions in the chat. I'll be checking. So let's start with a simple question. And I would love for all of you to answer this question. So it is, what romance subgenre do you write, and why did you choose to write it, or why did it choose you? And anybody can jump right in.
Well, I write military and police procedural romances. And the reason I do that is because I served in the military for 22 years. And then while I was in the military, I was in a career field that was a cop. So it's what I know.
I'll second that. I write about wild, fearless, young, passionate love. Not necessarily hot, steamy sex all the time, but hey, some of that. And you know, all the ups and downs and the roller coasters of young love and that first love, right? And I drew from personal experience. It was years of just this crazy roller coaster. Like, people I tell, they're like, that ain't real. I'm like, I can put fiction on it and people won't think it's real. And it worked. It worked really well. So I'm like, yes. I'm just looking for like the chilled out roller coaster now.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that. Having those kinds of stories where you're like, nobody would believe it. I relate to you, and you can put it under fiction now. Yay. That's great.
It's the best cover story. I mean, it won't be covered forever, but that's okay.
And Chris, someone in the chat who is saying, Julie, who is saying, thank you for your service.
Oh,
Just wanted to let you know.
thank you.
All right, ladies, go on ahead.
Well, I write sweet romance, and I chose that genre because that's mostly what I read. Before I started writing, I was reading a lot of suspense. So my first book has some suspense in it, but I really gravitated toward the romance. And so I read a lot of sweet romance, and that's just kind of what's in my heart. So that's what I write.
Well, I write steamy contemporary romance, which focuses on more fiery, I call it smart romance. So my heroines tend to be, they have their own jobs, more high-powered corporate world, and that's where I come from. So again, I kind of write about what I know, and I also do tend to write more romantic comedies as well, because that's what I like to read.
I run the gamut. All of my stories are fairly steamy, sexy. I started with paranormal romance mainly because I was reading that at the time that I discovered that I could become an indie author. And so I decided to go into that subgenre. But I have contemporary romance, I have urban fantasy, and I have plans for some historical romance at some point. So
I basically write something that I call romantica, which is romance with an erotic edge. It works for me. I like my characters to be real and a little on the gritty side, and very, very, very real, very real. My alphas, of course, we all have those. And I do lean heavily on strong, independent, opinionated women. And I can't imagine where that came from or what my inspiration is for that, but that's what I do.
That's great. So as you guys see, we have a very diverse panel here, which is fantastic. So one typical subplot that we see in so many genres, I think every genre, I actually haven't come across one that doesn't have romance, at least to some degree. It's such a great subplot. We see it all over. Would you say that romance is the most universal genre? Like, since it commonly appears just everywhere, it doesn't matter if you're reading fantasy, sci-fi, I don't know, the hardest type of tech stuff. Chris, you write military, you know, it can be in just everything. So would you say that it is the most universal genre?
I think it's like the most universal just feeling, isn't it? No matter where you go, romance, that feeling that we have is universal, right? Can it translate into a genre of writing?
And
I agree with that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, please. I think it's just the emotional connection between the characters, especially if you have tension. In of the other genres, the mystery, the suspense, the sci-fi, they have the tension. So they have the bond build between the two characters. It's almost natural to have a romantic connection. or a love of some sort that happens. So it's human nature. Why wouldn't it show up in the book?
Definitely. And love is such a strong emotion. And so you can really dig deep with your characters with that strong emotion. So I think that calls to people too.
I think it humanizes it and makes it really relatable. So sci-fi and fantasy, you are transported into another world, but if there's that romance, you can step into the character's shoes. It's relatable. You know, it's something that Miranda touched on, where we have experienced it and we can really kind of put our own spin on it. Even if this is a dystopian romance, it's still something we can relate to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, most readers
all of us
connect with romance.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely relatable. Like you guys are saying, we see it everywhere, and there are so many reasons why. I'm glad you guys pointed out so many good things. So I totally agree with all of you, although you're the experts, not me. So what do you think romance has to have if you're reading it, if you're writing it, no matter what you're doing? And if that thing or those things, whatever those things are, could be any number, aren't present, then it can't be called a romance.
Ooh. I was going to first yell out conflict, but I
I was
almost
going to say tension. Yeah. Definitely tension.
Yeah.
I would say it has to have a happy ending.
Yep.
Otherwise, it turns into a Nicholas Sparks type of, it's a love story.
Oh my gosh, I know. I call it the Nicholas Sparks effect. When someone
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm like those happily ever after endings, and my readers look for what they call feels, and I didn't even know that word until people started saying it back to me. So to me, romance, there's a happily ever after, and there are a lot of feels.
Yeah, there's that tension, that push-pull, whether it's push-pull between the romantic characters or it's something that's pushing and pulling the characters apart or together. There's some tension that and then the feels happen in between.
And they get the happily ever after. And it just feels
Yes,
like
always.
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 Okay, well, I have a feeling this is going to come up at some point, so I'm going to throw it out there because I saw Miranda's Facebook post and I saw something commented on it. So I'm going to say, do you think it's necessary to have like a full sex scene or only like the lead up, or does it not matter and it's just up to every author like for their genre, or like what do you guys think about that?
Ooh, I think my first writing experience, I was all about it. Like I was all about the dirty details and the this and the that. And then when my second book came out, and like, right, you're just so gung-ho and you're like, I'm gonna make the difference. It's like, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel, woman? Like, just no. So the second half of my writing experience is I kind of try to do the less is more, because then we get to leave it up to our imagination, and we're already kind of twisted and contorted in our own way as authors. Like that means our readers are equally as twisted and contorted. So I would just love to see what kind of imagining world and scene that they butter up all by themselves. I just kind of drop little breadcrumbs, let's call them.
I do both. I do very explicit, and I also do fade to black because sometimes that is a hook for the readers.
I also do very explicit, but I try to make sure I have maybe 2 of those, and then I'll do a fade out just so it doesn't. I also have another pen name where I do erotica, and so I do know that there's a difference. Maybe we'll get into this later, but there is a difference between the readers who would want what an El Viviani book would be, and then what my pen name with erotica would be. And I know that maybe in the erotica book, there's more explicit sex scenes. They don't really want the fade out as much. They still want the tension, but they want more of the, the explicit scenes. Whereas in the contemporary, steamier less steamier, I guess, but still steamy romance. There's a nice balance between the two. Yeah. And then I've read plenty of other authors who fade out and it works just fine. So it might be preference.
Well, I write sweet romance, and so none of my books have sex in them.
Exactly.
And you know, there's just different audiences for the different kinds of books.
Yeah,
and you kind of have to figure out, you know, what audience you're writing to, and I really kind of celebrate when I get a review on one of my books that says I usually read steamy, but I really enjoyed this one, even though there was no sex. I'm like, yes, I did a good job.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say most of my books have some explicit sex scene. And when I first started, I was really worried about this. How many do you have to have? Should I have it? You know, and I would ask authors this, and someone told me, she said, only write it if it has something important to the story. And most of the time I find there is. If I have more than one sex scene in a book, it's because the sex that couple experienced had some, either a driving force in the relationship or a resolution to something, and it was important to their story, because sex is important. I mean, I've been married 20 years and it's pretty darn important. So it usually has a purpose to the story.
Yeah, these are all great points. Thank you. We actually have a number of questions in the chat already, which is awesome. So thank you, everyone watching. We have a question from Antonio. His was the first, so I'll just start with his. He says, my romantic dialogues sound amazing in my head, but in paper come out either dull, cheesy, or way too poetic to feel real. How does a real romantic dialogue play for you? I would have the same question, actually, because I don't write it. So I would feel like what I was writing was probably either too, like he's saying, cheesy or dull, one way or the other, maybe extreme.
That's actually a great question. And I would say it's all in the subtext, what they're not saying. So you can, if you think about people flirting and what you kind of say to someone when you're flirting with them, it's what you're not saying that's important. And so I would say it's figure out how to write really good subtext, and you can write really good romance dialogue.
And I think sometimes embracing the cheesy is quite okay.
I was going to say that too, yes.
That's a great point. Sometimes it's more about what they're doing, like the body language, the looks, the words they're not saying. That, again, I guess it goes back to tension. And sometimes you don't rely on what they're saying, especially as a woman. I love to like dissect things like that. I mean, I'm thinking of Pride and Prejudice. They barely say anything to each other for a lot of the book, right? It's all about like the glance and the heavy looks. And I love that. I can watch that movie on repeat and still wonder, are they going to get together in the end? So I kind of feel like get the cheesy stuff out of the way, and then in the second draft, go back through and take them out and put more of the body language in. I also read out loud a lot of my dialogue in the second run through, and that helps too, because I mean, sometimes you really are like, a guy wouldn't say that, you know, but it comes out when you're reading it out loud. So
another thing you can do is you can show with your writing not only the dialogue, but the mental thoughts going through both of the people's minds. So you can alternate on your POVs, and you can actually underwrite that cheesy script to make it substantial and to make it fit the moment.
Yeah, this is all wonderful advice. This is very helpful to me too. I hope this helps you, Antonio. We have a couple more questions. The next one is from Joe from Go Indie Now. He is asking, what part of your stories do you think would entice men to read your books? And what is one thing you think you do in your writing that men would be happily surprised by? That's an interesting one.
I have tits in the title.
Yeah.
Simple minds, simple pleasures. I think being real. I don't know if guys love the mushy stuff, but my romance is real and it's hot and heavy, and I tell people that that's the first thing. If a guy's gonna come up to me at a signing, I don't know if it's to talk to me or to get my book, right? I don't know. So I tell them this is what it is, and they're like, all right, sign it. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then they always end up going and leaving a review somewhere. And I crushed back 2 beers and I loved it. And I'm like, what? But it's real, right? It's the men and the women almost being on an equal level, and where the romance goes back and forth, and the effort and the chivalry goes back and forth, right? I don't know. That's a little different for me, maybe.
No, I think that's true. I think for me, I don't know that I know of any guys that have read my contemporary romance, but if you get into the paranormal stuff, I mean, there's enough action that they can get into that. They like that. Hey, yeah, vampires, and it gets cool at that point. So I'd say that I have a few guys that I know have read those books. But I would imagine men may have more interest in this stuff than they would let on. I mean, they're into romance too. Otherwise, yeah.
I know that's a fact because my Facebook ads, marketing, which we all hate. Anyway, my Facebook ads say that I have more male clicks on my ads than I have female clicks.
I hear you. I hear you 100%.
Wow.
That's amazing. That surprises me. I had no idea.
There's a man in one of my critique groups, and I'm not going to say his name because he'll kill me, but he really enjoys my books because of the humor that I put in there. And my goal every time I read is to try and make him laugh out loud. And so that's something I think that can draw both female and male readers.
I've had husbands of some of my female readers write to me and say some of the funniest stuff. They read scenes out loud, and they seem to like the books. I find that fascinating. I don't think I'm writing for a male audience, but some of those guys are just hilarious. I love it.
So my husband is another indie romance author, and he writes romantic comedies, steamy contemporary. It's actually the one that got me into this. And he likes the books that, I mean, again, romance isn't what he grew up on, but he does tend to like the books that are funny, that have great banter and tension between the two, between the heroine and hero. And also heroes that are a bit relatable. So not just the total alpha billionaire who has really no motivation whatsoever, except that this woman is hot. Like, no, okay, make this hero more relatable and a little bit more grounded. He can still be a billionaire, but what is his motivation? What makes him tick? Yeah, so I think putting some effort too into the hero, making him be just as fiery or strong as the heroine. Yeah.
Well, this next question may not apply to you, Elle, because it is from JB, and it says, why aren't there a lot of men writing romance? I just happen to tell us.
My husband knows he's one of the more few, I think. Yeah. Hey, JB.
Yeah, like I said earlier, that's a great question, JB. I had a very hard time finding a male romance author. I asked a couple. I didn't get responses back. And then I had one person who just couldn't make it, and so he did his blog post. But it is a good question. Why aren't there men writing romance, especially if we see that they are reading it or they're interested, clicking on ads and stuff? How come they're not writing it even under a female pseudonym? Or maybe they are. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know that they aren't writing it. You have no way of knowing that. It's very anonymous.
Actually, a friend of mine who got me into getting published, he wrote erotica under a pen name for, I think he had like 12 books. I'm like, I didn't even know you wrote. Like, what? He's like, yeah, I got 12 books. I'm like, and he's like, you would never expect it. Like, all right, that's cool. Good for you.
I would say probably, again, just going back to my husband, it doesn't come naturally. Like, he had to do a lot of research but he knew that romance was a huge bestseller. Lots of different subgenres to write in. He also started out in erotica. So maybe, and I'll tell you, he wants to write fantasy and sci-fi, but he writes romance. It's a big seller. But he reads sci-fi and fantasy for fun. So I think, JB, it's probably that it takes a lot of research, and it's a bit different. It would be like if I was writing fantasy, I would have to really do a lot of research, a lot of market research, which I still do for romance, but it's, I grew up on romantic comedies, so it's a little different.
Okay, great. It's so funny that I had such a hard time, Elle, and your husband is right there.
I didn't realize, I'm sorry.
That's fine. I didn't tell you I had a problem with that. Okay. So we do have a few more questions in the chat. I do want to get to them, of course, but I want to make sure that there are a couple of questions that I had that I think everyone is going to find interesting. So let me just throw in one of our questions that we were going to talk about, and then I'll get back to the chat questions. I see you guys. Thank you so much for asking your questions. They are great. So what I wanted to ask you is, I think this is interesting. When I looked up romance novels, just put in romance novels on Google, the first result I got was Pride and Prejudice, which, as we all know, is a classic and has been around for a very long time. So it surprised me that was the first one. And the second, or sometimes third, depends on when you look, was 50 Shades of Grey. And so those are total opposites. You have like a 19th century, very, very, like, Elle, you're saying, it's all about the tension. And then we have 50 Shades of Grey, which is just explicit, So what do you think of those results? And like, what do you think that they mean about the state of modern romance readers? I know that they're diverse, but this is very, very diverse, right? What do you guys think of that?
I think it's stimulation and just what we're all open to every day, right? What we see, everything that we've experienced, the change and the openness of everything over the last 10 to 12 years. I think it shifted our entire way of thinking. It shifted our entire way of conventional living, right? One mom, one dad, happy little family in a house with a white picket fence and a dog, versus beautifully blended families and all this and that and bacon fat. And, I think anything goes now. And that's the best part of it, because now romance isn't just this little itty bitty thing that's picture perfect. It can be picture perfect, or it could be messy and beautiful, or anything in between. And it's accepted by all, right? Where I'm not going to pick up and read the same author and that's the only thing that I'm going to read. I get to now dibble dabble into a bunch of different things, and my romance checkbox gets to get checked off every time.
Well said.
Thank you.
I also think it indicates how wide the audiences are in who read romance. There's so many different, kinds of romance and kinds of readers out there. And I think Google was just trying to figure out what you wanted to read.
Diversity is huge in romance. Diversity is huge in romance. There's as many types and genres of romance as you can imagine, and there's more every day. It's not a stagnant writing. It's diverse, as I said. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the reader is always going to find something new, and whether it's you writing it or somebody else, their background, their pleasure, their enjoyment will be catered to sooner or later. They'll find a romance book they can enjoy. They might not find a sci-fi book they can enjoy, but they will find a romance one.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we said at the beginning, that how universal romance is. Everybody can relate in some form or fashion to romance, but I think it's refreshing that Pride and Prejudice is still at the top, that we're still loving those old classics, but we can go and pick up 50 Shades of Grey if we want to. I read all of them. I'm an eclectic reader. I love being able to switch it up from time to time, depending on my mood. So I think that all of them have that universal romance that we're all appealed, by, but now we can push some boundaries and delve into areas that I think that we might not have done before.
I always think that it must be you're either one camp or the other, but probably there are a lot of people who are just into romance, period, and want to read, like you guys are saying, something, they want to read diverse authors. And, probably someone would come in here and read every single person on this panel and then some, like outside of these subgenres that we're talking about. So yeah, that's a very good point, and it's probably a really great thing. It gives everyone a chance, but I know that romance readers are also voracious, so it's great that they, like so much. It's awesome. Okay, so like I said, we have some questions over here in the chat, so I'm going to take some from here. Lillian is saying, in many circles, I know men and women who have voiced their frustration with the sexualization of either gender on romance covers. Has there been any talk in the romance community about changing this to be more marketable to a wider reader base? You guys think? I know there's like the classic, bodice ripper, covers, and not everyone here.
The Fabio with better hair than I do.
Absolutely, yeah. I know you did it.
Well, I'm gonna weigh in with just an observation. I've had a book that had a lovely sort of generic cover that you would see at Walmart or in Barnes and Noble, and it did not have near the sales that it did when I changed the cover and made it a bit more energetic, sexually, I guess you could say, once the male chest is there. It sold. So is there a conversation? The conversation pretty much revolves around that. You can try something that's not overtly sexual, but it doesn't always sell. I was talking to somebody earlier about the cover gets your interest, and then the blurb is what draws the click to the buy. Well, if your cover isn't getting the interest, then you never get to the point where you're selling with your blurb to a buy. Mm-hmm. Just my opinion.
I agree with that. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm actually a cover designer as well as a writer. And the most important thing your cover can do is tell your potential audience what genre that book is. That really needs to come across on the cover. And so if you're writing sweet romance like I write, then I don't have, guys without shirts on the cover, because that would send the wrong message. But if you're writing, something steamier, then you really kind of have to show that on the cover.
And then I think within that,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, even within, like, I agree with sweet romance and then with steamy, then you need to even know the subgenre within that. You really need to do your market research. So when I did my fake relationship series, I looked at the covers of other fake relationship books. I didn't just look at romance in general. I was like, okay, well, what is going to tell a reader that this is a fake relation? I guess not even exactly what tells them, but what other books are out there? What are they looking like? What will have them click over to mine? Like, I don't want it to be a complete outlier, right? It's based on the market. I completely agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I do some cover design too, but I remember really early in my writing career, someone asked me about my covers. This was before I was designing my own. And she said, do your covers portray what the book is? And is the hair color right? Or the eyes right? Is the feel right for what your book is? And I said, yes. And she said, because people say that the cover, it's like a bond you're making with the potential reader. If that cover betrays what that book is, the reader will not be happy. They expect that cover to tell them just by a glance what they're going to get when they open that book. And if it's a man chest, that's what it should tell the reader. And if it's a sweet and contemporary story, it should portray that on the cover.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice in general too for any book. If you show exactly what the reader is getting into, they're more likely to enjoy it because they're getting what they expect, of course. If that makes sense. Okay, I have another one from Carol. She says, my husband, a sci-fi writer, reads my romance and tells me a guy would never do that or say that. How can you hold down the mush and make the romance more intelligent? It's a great question.
Talk to a dude. That would be where I would start.
Yeah.
You get into the psyche of them. I mean, you might have to coax them with some food and beer or something like that, but it's overcomplicated. We overcomplicate it going, I'm gonna go do research in Google. I don't know, maybe I would, but I would just go talk to a few of my guy friends, maybe separate them in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and ask them a series of questions, get to know what romantic is to them, and use that in my writing, because they have really complex minds. They just don't always portray it all the time outwardly to the world. Maybe to their innards, but outwardly they don't.
My husband is my alpha reader, and he has no problem telling me that is not working. I would never do that. I don't know of a man that would do that. You need to take that out and start over. I listen to him. It seems to go.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there would be some kind of a balance between what a reader would want to see. Like if you're reading and you're like, oh, I want to see this sweet romance, or I want to see these two people get together. There's got probably a balance between idealistically what a man would say and what he would really say, and probably somewhere in between, I would guess, because you don't want that kind of harshness sometimes.
Yeah, you are entering into a fantasy romance, right?
It also depends on how you set your character up too, because if you set your male character up to be kind of like Simon Cowell, where he never gives a compliment ever, and then if he gives her one little compliment, that can be way more romantic than anything mushy.
And impactful, just totally impactful. Small little gestures to a harder character or a tougher character makes the biggest difference. And you're like, yeah, cheering on the underdog.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I guess there would always have to be some kind of a balance, if it's that kind of a balance, or the balance between idealistic and realistic. It's probably always a matter of balancing properly. Or having your husband just tell you. Well, that's probably the best.
It works.
Okay, we have one more over here. Antonio is asking, how often does the from hate to love come up in romance, and do you feel it has been overused? Or can it be overused?
What about the love to hate?
It's like a non-romance? Anti-romance?
Anti-romance.
I guess I would argue there's only two tropes. I mean, the way I see it, it's either friends to lovers or it's an enemies to lovers. Yeah, because even if you would randomly meet someone at the bar, it'd be a pretty boring book if they just got along perfectly. And I mean, it'd be too ordinary, right? If they just got along perfectly, he asked her out on a second date, it went really well, and they went and had a great movie date. There has to be that conflict and that tension. And so I guess I'm biased. I love writing enemies to lovers. I think they are so much fun. I tend to love reading those books. I think they're best for romantic comedies too. I think they're just fun. So I would argue, no, I do not think they're overdone. Let's go back to Pride and Prejudice. It's like our favorite enemies to lovers. And then you could say Emma would be a great friends to lovers. So Yeah, I think that there's probably two out there. I mean, maybe there are more, but I think if you really distill them down, you have to choose, you know, which way you're going to go. And sometimes it can be, you know, enemies to friends to lovers, or, you know, a slow burn like that. But yeah, I don't think it's been overdone.
Never.
Yeah, it's epic.
It's probably most movies, most romantic comedies.
Oh yeah, there's
of course.
definitely.
It's where the tension comes from.
Yeah, that's true. All right, I have some more questions in the chat. You guys have been awesome tonight. Thank you so much for these wonderful questions. Joshua is saying, I don't know many typical stereotypes of men that fit for millennials. I wonder if that changes romance fiction. What do you guys think?
I don't think so, because you don't have to be stereotypical when you write. You don't have to have the alpha male with the flag, you know, like I write. You can have a beta male, you can have a millennial, you can have whoever you want, and you can write a love story to that person. You don't need a stereotypical example. You need a human contact. You need to be able to place that person into a mental situation, into a physical situation, and you can write to it.
Beautifully explained. Beautiful.
Yeah.
You did the explanation of explanations, Chris.
Perfect.
Amy is asking, how many of you are full-time authors living off of your writing income?
Yes, I am.
I am.
I am.
Full-time.
That's fantastic.
I'm not.
Neither am I.
Yeah. That's great though, and it's great to know. I know that romance is one of the bigger ones, so it's bigger genres. And so, yeah, that's very interesting to hear. And of those of you who answered, I think that you're all prolific, right? You have quite a lot of books out there. Pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the keys to being able to live off of your writing, is to put out a lot of books.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be prolific. You have to keep your catalog moving. You can't just rely on what's already out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have one from Deirdre, and she is saying, would you consider some of the romance today a modern romance versus what our mothers read with the bodice ripping style from the 60s and 70s?
I think we get it all plus more now. Like, we get everything and in between it. And I think that's just the best thing about it, is that we all fit some way, shape, or form.
I read a whole garbage bag full of Harlequin romances that I stole from my aunt. And I tell you, I've gone from the bodice rippers to the science fiction, but they're all romance. So I don't think that it's a huge difference. I just think it happens to be a different dress. I don't have shoulder pads now. Yeah. You know, we're not talking about we're not talking about wine coolers. You know, things change, and the environment changed and the people change, but romance stays constant.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the romance part of it hasn't changed too much over the years. I think maybe writing style has changed. You don't see as many adverbs and stuff like that in there, but I think for the most part, the core romance, the part that we all love, the feels, that hasn't changed too much.
These are great answers. Thank you. Okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you guys is that we all know that, you know, one of the reasons, actually, no, we don't all know. When I was doing research for this panel, I was looking up why is romance such a popular genre. And one of the things that I was finding is that readers experience a happily ever after or an ideal situation that they can't necessarily have themselves, or it's not as perfect or exactly what they would have liked to experience even, something along those lines. And so the other reason is that it can give them an escape if they're feeling hopeless. So I wanted to ask you guys how you think romance improves readers' lives.
I think, well, for my books, I'm not a happy ending all the time with my romance novels. There's a lot of other aspects to it, but it definitely has come to my attention through my writing and through the relationships that have been built in my books, and the triumphs and the roller coasters of emotion, and that connection really gives the reader that ability to connect with them and go, okay, I went through this with my partner, or I went through this with my, you know, my husband last week, or, oh, okay, I'm not the only person that feels this, want to love you and kiss your face, but also, you know, maybe to your eyes every now and then, you know, it's right. And that's what it's come back to me, is that if I can connect emotionally to any moment in my reader's life, I've done my job. That's what we're here to do, is we're here to connect with our readers. And if we can connect with one moment that they're familiar with, we've done our job.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's the escape. I've had readers communicate with me that, oh my gosh, you know, my mother passed away and I was having such a hard time, but I was able to just bury myself in your books, and it just helped me get through that time. And then sometimes it's that the book is relatable. It's me. It's that story could be my story. You know, whether it's some of us that are, you know, BBW, big beautiful women, who feel like that romance that featured that heroine that was, you know, that was like that, made me feel like that romance could be mine. So I think it's a twofold. Either it's an escape, or it may be a relate that could relate to that book.
Yeah. What do you think, Suzanne?
Well, it's escape, it's entertainment, and sometimes it's validation. It's a romance is a lot of different things. It just covers the gamut. I've been lucky enough to have a series that I'm working on, so my happily ever afters don't have to happen within the confines of one book. I have couples that it's taken many books. You see them in a group situation, for them to get to the point where we're even looking at if a happily ever after is possible. And so that changes it for me. It changes it for my readers. It's not just, I got to get this done in 200 pages, you know, boom, 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 boom. It just keeps going on. And so for me, it's, again, it's entertainment, it's validation. In some cases, it's therapy. It's just everything.
Therapy's a good one. Because that could be taken any way, shape, or form, right?
Yes, it's my therapy, right? It's my therapy. I'm forcing it on you.
That's a great point, though. That's very true. All of those validation, too. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but that's...
Yeah. We all a little closet freaky. We all are.
Oh, yeah. Love getting swept up into someone else's story, like from my couch, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you get to just enter into this totally new world. You could go to New York for a few hours, or LA, and I know that, I'm sure fantasy and sci-fi, you know, have that same draw, but with romance, I love getting to know these people on a deeper level. It's all about the relationship. I mean, it could be happening in New York or LA. That's just the backdrop, the setting, but you know, you get really attached to these characters, especially with series, like what Suzanne was talking about. You know, you really get attached to them.
Invested.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And it could be like, you know, Sex and the City, where everybody sort of places themselves in one category or another. I know that was so popular, and it's still popular, like still super popular. And you hear people say like, oh, I'm a Miranda, or, you know, I'm a Carrie, or something like that. Even now. We have another question in the chat, and it's from Joe. He is saying, or he's asking, do you all introduce yourselves as romance authors or just author? I'm an author, or I'm a romance author.
I'm a storyteller. And that's actually what my card says. It says storyteller, and then we get to the other part.
I usually say I'm
a romance author.
Yep.
Yeah, I usually say author, and then if they ask what I write, then I tell them I'm a romance author.
I ask them what they want to read, and then they tell me, and I said, I got a book for you.
That's great.
I got self-promotion. I love it.
Oh, nobody makes eye contact with me at a bookstore or anywhere without me catching them. Like, don't even look at me because you're mine. Like, we are having a conversation and we are being friends. You have no choice out of this. I introduce myself as a storyteller or as an author. But when I say author, a lot of people are like, so you like write for fun? I'm like, no, I'm actually like, I'm published. Like I've sold around the world. And they're like, sorry. Right? Maybe I should try the romance thing, see how that goes for a while.
Yeah, I guess it also depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Do you want to get your genre out there right out front, or are you trying to say, hey, I'm a writer? Also, I write romance. Probably depends on what your goal is. Maybe self-promotion, marketing, all of that. Or if you're going to stare someone down and like get them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta learn from you, Miranda. So I wanted to ask you guys, according to Bookstr.com, and I have this and the link down below in case you're watching this afterwards, you want to check it out. And it says there that the romance and erotica publishing industry is worth $1.44 billion, which blew my mind. It was more than even I expected. And so my question with that is they automatically lump romance and erotica together. And so we sort of dealt with this already when we talked about Pride and Prejudice versus 50 Shades of Grey. But like, do you always expect to be lumped in? Like, do people just sort of think, oh, they're the same thing? Does that bother you? Is it like, who cares? It's all in the same general area. Like, how do you feel about that?
I think the more the merrier. Somebody wants to lump me in, sweet. Then maybe somebody I don't expect will pick it up, right? It's an opportunity, all opportunities.
Yeah, I'm a who cares because I started out as a teacher. I was a teacher for 30 years. So anything that makes someone read a book is okay with me.
It doesn't bother me to be lumped in. Sometimes when I tell somebody I'm a romance author, they say, oh, you write smut. Well, okay, maybe I do.
I do think we're lumped in with erotica. I do think you're right, Christy. I don't think they're the same thing. Just to answer that question. I mean, they do have, the reader would have different expectations, which I think then comes down to what your cover looks like and your blurb. And you just make sure that you say that is not, because, that's why I've kept my erotic writing separate from my main pen name. The readers expect different things. So.
And I think there's kind of a difference between erotica and erotic romance to me. Whether I'm looking for just sex and they don't need any romance, or the sex is a part of the romance. It might be very explicit, taboo sex, but if it's part of the romance, I still consider that part of erotic romance is different than erotica.
Oh, okay. I guess I consider it to be erotic romance. See, so it even...
That's why I call what I do romantica, because I say it's romance with an erotic edge. The romance element is there. The erotica does not stand alone.
And actually, sorry if I missed this, but before, Chris, did you say that you write romance, or do you say military romance? Because that's a very unique subgenre, I would say. What do you usually say?
Yeah, I write a military romance series that has a lot of police procedural elements to it.
And so that's how you would introduce yourself, as military romance?
Yeah.
I would too, because it's very, I think that's harder to find.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, and let's end up with a question for all the writers out there, which is, if a writer wants to start writing, just romance in general, no matter what they're writing, what advice would you give to them that you wish you'd had when you first started?
Writing the book is the start of the process. Getting the words down is great, but the process that comes afterwards, the editing, the marketing, the getting the book cover, all the other stuff that comes with writing a book, I had no idea. It was mind-blowing, the stuff that you have to do after you write the book.
Oh, yeah.
It's much more professional than you realize when you just start putting words on paper.
It's a job.
Yes. Yeah.
And some people think writing romance is easy. And so they choose romance on purpose because they think it's an easy genre to write. And I know you're all laughing because you know that's not true. So I'd say just read a lot of romance before you even start writing. And that will be really beneficial to you.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely true. I mean, if you want to just write a romance, go for it. If you want to write a romance, though, that will get a following or sell or at least be a little close to market, then do your research and read what's selling and read what's out there. Yeah, it doesn't mean you have to be super trendy, but definitely know what business you're about to crack into, because as Christy said, it's a massive industry, very voracious readers, and they will put your book down, not a problem, and go on to the next. There's a huge supply, and so you have to try to make that book sticky. So I would say do your research and read.
One piece of advice that I actually did get before I started writing my first ever book, and it was the by far best ever advice that I got, was, Miranda, do you want to write a book to give yourself therapy, to share your story? Or do you want to write a book and build a brand, build yourself a business with it? Obviously, I want to do the latter. Do your research, find your market, because it's easier to research who your reader would be. Create that ideal reader that if you were to tell your story, pick it up and read your story to that person, who would that ideal reader be? Because that way you can write a book to them. It's easier to write a book to a reader versus find a reader to read a book to. And then just get the ball rolling. Because a moving object is way easier to direct in the right direction than a standing still object. So just start writing, because it only goes up from there, right?
Yeah, I would say slow down. Don't be in a hurry, because it's so, we're in this world of instant gratification. You can write that book, hit that button, and send it out there into the world. But if you haven't done any work leading up to it, then you're going to be very disappointed. So take your time, figure it out, do your research, figure out what your goal is, and be very deliberate about it.
Yeah, this is all fantastic advice. And actually, speaking to what Victorine said before, I came across just randomly this writing course that was specifically romance writing. And I was like so tempted to take it, not because I'm going to write it, because I'm just interested. Like, how do you ladies do it? And like, where do you start? And how do you build it, sort of? Like, for someone who doesn't write it, I was just really interested. So yeah, this is all really, really helpful information. I'm sure for all the writers out there, I've been seeing a lot of people in the chat are saying, fantastic panel. I love this panel. You guys are great. So I want to make sure you guys know that. This has been awesome. I've learned a ton. So I'm so glad that you guys were able to make it here tonight. And thank you so much to all our friends in the chat. You were amazing. I loved all of your questions, and thanks for asking. And so let's each take a turn telling everyone where we can find each other or ourselves. And after that, you guys want to stay tuned so I can tell you what's coming up for the Writer's Edge and also about tomorrow's Go Indie Now episode. So anyway, let's get started, and let's start with Miranda.
All right, guys. You can find me on Twitter at @OMirandaO, and the O's are OH. Or you can just hashtag chin up tits out, and I promise you'll find me so easily. So please join the movement of leading a chin up tits out life. It will change your life, and it will just be amazing.
Thank you, Miranda.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And next is Chris.
You can find me on Facebook. I am pretty active there. Chris Michaels, and Chris with a K-R-I-S, spelled differently. But I'd love to see you there. I do have a Twitter presence, but it's not O Miranda.
Thank you so much for being here. And Elle?
So I'm at Elle Viviani at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I have a website and on Goodreads as well. So, yeah.
Okay, and JD Estrada says pecs out for the boys, just so you know. Miranda's free. So next is Victorine.
You can find me on Twitter at Victorine Liskey. I know that's hard to spell, but if you Google Victorine, you'll find me. I have a website, victorineliskey.com. And on Amazon, I have 2 books free right now. Accidentally Married is free, and that I plan to keep free a long time, so you can download it and try me out.
Great, thank you. The next is Suzanne.
Well, I am everywhere. Facebook, of course, and Goodreads. I have a website, authorSuzanneHalliday.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty easy to find. And I am also on Book and Main, always at Suzanne Halliday. Thank you so much. This was great fun.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad to have all of you here. And Olivia.
I am on Facebook most of the time, Olivia Harden. You can find me. You can also find me on my website, olivia-harden.com. I have some books out there that are available right now for free download with a book funnel. So if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see those and you can kind of check me out. And thank you so much for having me. I had a good time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. This was, as I keep saying, this was an amazing panel. We learned so much, and you guys got to answer so many questions. It was really helpful. And again, a lot of people are saying how helpful this was. So thank you guys. You know me, I'm Christy Stratus, host of The Writer's Edge. You can find me here, of course, on YouTube. And you can also go to thewritersedgeshow.com. You can go to find The Writer's Edge on Facebook, same thing, The Writer's Edge Show. And then for me, myself, as an author of psychological suspense, you can find me on christystratus.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest. The list goes on. I just joined something else. I don't know. I'm on pretty much anywhere you look, I will be there. So I want to let you guys know that our next panel is going to be on March 22nd. It's going to be at the same time, 10 p.m. Eastern time, and we're going to have the owners of Coffin Hop Press, and they're a small press in Canada, and they have the motto, new crime, new weird, new pulp. So we'll also have some of their authors here, and stay tuned to hear more about them. I hope that you guys will be there. I think I already have the video up, and if not, then I will have it up very, very soon so that you guys can bookmark it. And also make sure that you go tomorrow and check out Go Indie Now, which is going to revolve around horror. So it's at 9 p.m. Eastern with a Valentine's theme, just like, actually not like ours, it's the opposite of ours, love of horror and the horror of love. So I'm definitely going to be there. I will see you guys there in the chat. Again, thank you so much to everyone in the audience, and thank you so, so much to everyone here on the panel. We learned a ton, and you guys were wonderful. Everyone on this panel, by the way, is super friendly, so feel free to contact them and like their pages. You can find all their stuff down below. So thank you, and we will see you next month.